pick that groove against your snare. Kind of at all, really, right? You're basically just on 2 and 4 there, right? So the rock, you play rock? Yeah. Where you started playing? So rock grooves are all about right foot, left hand, right? It's cha, cha, right? That's where the whole kind of rhythmic element comes from, yeah? In jazz, we're gonna just flip that completely on its end. Instead of the right foot and the left hand, we're gonna go right hand, left foot, right? And you've got that happening, right? So the hi-hat, and you've got a nice crisp hi-hat sound going, that's gonna do that job, all right? And that'll free up your left hand to be more interactive, right? You can improvise some comping with that and your bass drum, right? So you get those going, and you just kind of hear how that's going to interact with your overall rhythmic figure, right? In a way that kind of livens things up. Right now, you're kind of wasting that energy by doing the same job, right? You got this going on, right? They're both doing the same thing, and you don't need them to. You don't need to. This is not you don't need that much support, especially because we're such a small group, right? It's not like you have to battle with the sound. So that backbeat will be there with just your hi-hat. Okay? You try that again? Start from the top. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Yes? Okay. Do you read music? Like I said, I'm a guitar player. I'm gonna pick on you a little bit. Guitar players, as a rule, as a group, we are notoriously bad readers. I was just assuming that it's a struggle for you at this point. It's a really good thing to be able to do. So anyway, the metronome. So make sure you work on that kind of thing with the metronome. Free up that left hand to be more interactive. Okay. Right? Cool. So let's go ahead and pick that up where the melody comes in. Okay? Oh, what tune is this, by the way? What is it? Little Man. Who wrote it? I'm sorry, say again.
Charles wrote it.
It's a Messenger's tune. Okay. Have you listened to it? A lot. Have you played along with it?
Yeah.
Have you played along with it?
I've listened to it and I've played it, but not together.
Okay. So play along with these things. Have you sung it? Have you sung along with it? Yeah? I got one very strong yes. I believe you. I don't believe you. Right? So as we sing along, and this goes for everybody, right? The more we absorb this material, the more we absorb this language, the more we can take just the notes and rhythms that we have and bring them to life. I'm curious how the evolution of these charts, do you have charts for this stuff? And did you learn it and then leave it at home, or did you learn it by ear, or what happened? Have charts. Okay, so much of what we do as jazz musicians goes beyond the notes and rhythms on the page, right? It's virtually impossible to notate jazz language because it would be so busy, right? You'd have so much notation on the page that it would just be a mess, and we couldn't we couldn't make heads or tails of it. Between the dynamics and the articulations and the inflections and the ghost notes and the grace notes and all these things, right? It's just not practical, right? It's not practical from a publishing standpoint to have somebody take the time to do that. It's not practical from a reading standpoint just because it's too much of a mess, right? So what that means is that we have to bring a lot to the table. We have to bring a lot of that language and a lot of that nuance to the table before we even start to play, before we even take a look at what's on the page, right? You just know coming in, I'm gonna have to add to this, right? And so the place that comes from is always from listening, right? Listening, listening, listening. And I think the best way to listen, to really listen actively, to really absorb what's going on, is to vocalize, right? We're all singers. I'm a big proponent of this. We're all singers. It doesn't matter whether you're playing bass, piano, guitar, or horn. We are all singers. And everything we play, to my mind, should be an extension of our voice. And that includes even percussion, right? Should be an extension of our voice. It should be something that we would otherwise sing if we could, or if we didn't happen to have a horn in our hands, or a guitar in our hands, right? So I'm a big believer in that. I'm a big believer that everything should be an extension of our voice, right? So as we vocalize these lines, we internalize them and the nuance of style in a way that just isn't possible otherwise, right? So if you can sing along with your parts, like if you take your parts and you really, really sing along with them, I think you internalize those things in a on a much deeper level, in a way that will then come out organically in what we do when we're on the bandstand. Okay? So as you listen to these recordings, sing along, really listen actively, get to know them, play along with the recordings, right? As you work on transcriptions, sing along with the transcription, then play along with the transcriptions, right? Again, I really think that includes drum kit. You can vocalize what you hear happening throughout a kit. Obviously, you can't do the multiple parts at once, unless you're some kind of really vocal freak who can do those things. But, those are few and far between, right? But you can vocalize what's going on. You can really sing a drum part. I really believe that, right? So yeah, vocalize along with the recordings, internalize what's going on, and that'll then come out in your playing. Cool? Awesome. So, again, so right where the horns come in, will you do this? Up there? You count it out. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. Get off those bottom strings, right? Obviously, our bar chords are near and dear to our hearts in rock music, right? In jazz, the sound is going to get a little muddy down there. You're kind of working in the same range as the bass, right? And frankly, we just don't need those notes, right? Those low roots and fifths are not something we need in most jazz situations until you're playing without one or both of these guys, right? So your voicings are good. You've got good solid a start on some of those voicings, but learn some voicings that are rootless, first of all, right? You don't need that low root, so just go ahead and work on the upper portions of the chord. Start 3, 5, 7, 3, 5, 7, 9 is a whole different seventh chord, right? So you'll have a whole different voicing for a seventh chord that substitutes. Everyone know this substitution at the third. Anyone familiar with that concept? Particularly you two should have it, but it's a really cool thing for improv and melody as well. The idea that if you have a major seventh chord, a minor seventh chord at the third gives you the major ninth sound. So if you want to improvise on a C major 7 chord, one of the really cool things to do is to play E minor 7. Right? If you spell E minor 7 as a melodic arpeggio, you get 3, 5, 7, and 9 of the original C chord. Right? So that's pretty cool because you end up with a slightly hipper sound, a slightly hipper note set to use, while at the same time avoiding the root, which is kind of square, right? It's kind of, I don't want to say it's a bad note. It's certainly not a bad note. We don't want to abandon roots completely, but we certainly don't need them in the chord, He's gonna play them, that's his job, so you don't have to, right? So, that kind of thing, so work on that, okay? I heard this a little bit more right now than I did from upstairs, and I don't know if you're playing any different, or I'm just hearing it different, or what's going on. But one of the things I commented on the recording while you guys were playing was the lack of dynamics in the rhythm section for what the horns were doing. I heard it more in the horns, the overall dynamic from section to section, and I would love to hear that incorporated more into the rhythm section. Like I said, I heard it a little bit more right now than I did earlier. And again, I don't know if you're playing it differently or not, but keep that in mind. I mean, this is a really nice example. We've got some things going on with the horn section, moving from section to section. The dynamics are pretty good. Work with that and support that. Okay? And I think it's important for everyone to remember that dynamics should be extreme, much more extreme than you think is going to be effective is necessary for it to actually be effective out here. You always found that? Yeah. I always use this analogy, particularly in rehearsal. I always ask my band to make their dynamics so extreme as to be silly. Like you think there's no way this is appropriate, right? It's like a caricature of a musical ensemble. Like this is something you see on Saturday Night Live, right? Like seriously, make things that extreme. When you want to go low, bring it down to nothing. When you want the dynamic to be high, really bring it and punch those things. Right? Make those dynamics more extreme. And I'd love to hear more support of that here. Okay? But keep that in mind. We're going to come back to it in just a second. Horns. This melody in particular, we've got a lot of these long notes, right? I'm a big believer in shape, melodic shape. Every note that's longer than, I don't know, a quarter note should have some kind of shape to it. Okay? Can you just play this melody for me, right where you come in? Don't worry about the rhythm section, just 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. Okay, so nice long tone melody, right? Ba-do-ba, 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 right? I think all those long tones can have some shape to them. Otherwise, they just kind of sit there, right? They just kind of sit there, and it's like, what do we do with that? Right? Can we punch those a little bit and kind of swell through the note? There's an orchestral word. It's sforzando. Is that right? Right? It's sforzando, right? So you kind of punch the attack, pull back, and then push through the rest of the note. Yeah, can you try that? 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. Right? Oh man, that sounds so good. It has so much more energy and kind of vitality to it, right? Talked about you doing things that aren't necessarily on the page. You wouldn't write that every time you see these long notes. Again, it just gets messy. But as kind of a natural element of kind of vibrant, living, breathing music, I think it's a really good thing to remember. Is like most notes are going to have some shape to them. Cool? All right, so rhythm section, go with their dynamics, not those long notes things, that's stupid. Let them do that. But more in the highs and lows of the different sections. Cool? So right at the top, let the rhythm section set this up again. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. I assume that broken ride is part of the part from the recording. Yeah. Okay. Don't do it right now. Okay. Hold off on that. Work on it. It's messing with your time. Okay. So keep the steady thing going for right now. The figure will be realized in what they're doing. It doesn't necessarily need your support, right? It can certainly be there, but it doesn't necessarily need it every time. For right now, stick with the time and do that. One more time. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. background doesn't change that idea, right? It still has to have some life to it, yeah? Cool. Throughout the performance, I love the fact that you guys take turns comping. Really, really good idea for a group with a piano and guitar. There are ways to have both playing at the same time, depends on what kind of groove it is. This one happens to be a basic swing thing, right? So if one of you plays pads, just longer notes, and one of you has a bit more rhythm, either way, that can work. But in general, you're both going to be like rhythmic, right? You'll be comping rhythmically, so really just stay out of each other's way, right? Make sure you're listening to that if you do end up playing together. But it's a good decision to not, right? So that's awesome. The other thing that I really want to touch on quickly before we get out of here.
About 5 minutes.
What? Yeah, 5. Cool. Thank you. Is the interaction with soloists, right? First of all, real quickly, backgrounds in any case. Be careful not to drown out your soloist, right? I say push through those notes. That doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be loud, right? One of the messages from up top from my fellow adjudicators as I was on my way down here was get used to the idea of playing with intensity, but quietly, right? And that is not easy to do for any of us. It's a really, it takes experience. But I heard do you know Dan?
Oh,
Yeah. So this is the first time I had heard this analogy. I thought it was a really, really good one, which was this this whisper shouting thing, where you're trying to be quiet, but it's like really intense, like hey, come here. Like I have a 10-year-old, so it's something I'm used to. Get over here. That kind of thing, though, right? How intense that is, but it's not shouting, right? It's not very loud, but it has an intensity to it, right? Excuse me. You know, on different horns, different instruments, that's going to be realized in a different way, but it's something that you want to start thinking about, right, and start to try and realize. Okay, so that was real quick. The other thing was I would really love to hear more interaction between the rhythm section and your soloist, right? What I'm hearing right now is essentially an air solo, right? You guys are laying down a decent groove. The sound is there. The chords are there, right? But there's no interaction at all, right? And this is partly the soloist's responsibility as well, right? You can pick up on things they do if they give you something, but you should definitely be picking up on things the soloist does, right? For younger groups, that means echoing, right? There's no way around it. That's how you start, is kind of hearing some of the figures that a soloist plays and starting to echo those back at them. Now, I say that with the caveat, thank you, with the caveat that you don't want to just keep doing that, right? That's how you start. You make sure you're listening and you pick up on some of the things the soloist does, right? As you grow in experience and as you get into more and more advanced ensembles, you don't want to, a soloist doesn't want to hear the things they play just aimed back at them all the time, right? So that's not what I'm saying, right? Keep that in mind. So this is a kind of a stepping stone into real interaction, right? What we really want to do eventually is have some kind of call and response and interactive experience with the rhythm section, right? I'm not hearing that nearly enough, right? And you've got some good soloists here and here, right? But take the opportunity to kind of hear what they do and react to that instead of, okay, this is my part, this is what I'm going to do, this is what it always is, and do your time. You know what I mean? Right? That ends up being, eventually, that ends up being kind of boring for your soloist and for the audience. So get in there and combine with what they're doing. Like I said, you want to start by just listening and kind of mimicking what they're doing to a certain extent, with the knowledge that that's not the end. Does that make sense? Okay. Unfortunately, I don't think we even have time to try that right now, but I did want to mention it.
You can go ahead. Just like a couple minutes is okay. Go ahead and run it if you want.
So can we just start at your solo a little bit? Okay. Listen for what he's doing. Listen for what he's doing. Try and respond to that. 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. So even a crash, you've got these, these 4 measure phrases, right? If he's going to set something up like that, ba ba da 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 da, ba ba da da ba da da, crash, crash, right? He's leaving that space, so you can fill that space. And if you guys can pick up on that and hear a sense of a short little fill that you know is going to culminate with that, try and pick up on that and play with it, right? So that kind of thing, that kind of thing. Just listen. Make sure you're listening to what the soloist does and start interacting with that instead of just kind of being over here in our little plastic shielded off room. Say, okay, here's your rhythm section, right? We don't want to just be just a bed for them to sit on and play, right? Again, they could do that with the neighbor solo. Hopefully, we become more than that as a rhythm section. Cool. Any questions? Anything I can answer for you? Okay. I hope you all had a good time. I hope you find it helpful, and I do look forward to hearing you again sometime. Those sound great. You have a bunch of tools that are already available to you that you're putting into use. So